Hi everyone, welcome to Hive Knits and Natters episode 2. I'm back! Hi, I'm Lizzie from Hive Knits over on Instagram. This is the second episode of my new podcast, Hive Knits and Natters. I live in Manchester in the UK and I work as a doctor, and when I'm not working as a doctor, I am knitting. Thank you so much for all your love in reaction to episode 1. Really overwhelmed and really grateful. Everyone made such lovely comments and shared it really widely. I really enjoyed making the episode. I filmed it on a complete whim, as I explained in episode 1, after night shifts on a complete lack of sleep, and it was really spontaneous. So I really didn't know how it was going to go down, which way it was going to go, but it's just been received so well, and for that I'm really grateful, so thank you. All the feedback about episode 1 has been pretty positive. The only things people said was that a couple of people said they struggled to hear me, but I've tried to make a couple of tweaks to today's camera setup to see if that makes a difference. I had some of my own feedback from episode 1, which was, 1, I just irritated myself so much because I touched my hair, and I literally lost count of how many times I touched my hair. So I'm so sorry if that grated on you as well. I think it's one of those things, once you notice it, you can't unsee it. So I've put some of it away, and I'm going to try really hard not to touch it so much today. So that's one thing. And I also lost track of the number of times I said the word That's probably something that happens to everyone, and I only probably noticed it as much because it was my own voice. But I'm gonna make an effort not to say that so much as well. The third thing was I chatted after being unsure if I'd have anything to say, which is so ironic. And I ended up having so much footage, and after some heavy editing, still managed to make a podcast which was an hour and 20 minutes long, which is quite long in comparison to a lot of the other ones that I've been watching. People seem to be mostly between sort of 45 minutes to an hour. So I wondered what you thought about the length. Does it put you off if something's, say, more than an hour, or are you quite happy to sit down and watch something that's lengthy, like get into it, have a bit of time to yourself, watch it in stages? I'm not sure, let me know. I'm going to try and make this one a little bit shorter, she says. Although the content that I got ready for this one, I thought, oh yeah, that'll be a really quick episode, and it's filled about 3 pages of my notebook. So I just touched my hair and said, sorry. So we shall see. I might end up cutting it in half and making it episode 2 part 1, episode 2 part 2, but I'll see how long it takes, and ultimately we're all here for knit and chat, so what's not to love? So like last time, a little bit of knit and a little bit of natter. I quite enjoyed the way the names kind of worked out with the podcast. Again, it was just something I thought of completely randomly with no sleep, but I quite like it. I've got my trusty tea as per last time. I've got my handy notebook. The one thing I don't have this time is a very exciting snack. Last time I had a brownie that had been made by Pete's sister, a Biscoff brownie, which was, as we all know from my reaction last episode, very good. This time, don't have anything hand-baked, much to my disappointment. So I've had to make do with a little dish of chocolate buttons, giant chocolate buttons though, so I'm still very happy with those. So I'll probably have a nibble on those as we go through. I'll just pop this up here. So while we are still at the beginning of the podcast and doing introduction-y stuff, I thought I would join in what seems to be happening in a lot of podcasts and doing a bit of a reciprocal podcast shout out for podcasts I've been really enjoying. I have really heavily got into knitting podcasts since starting my own. Before I did my own, I'd seen a few and I mentioned a few of them last time, but there's a whole world out there. There's so many fantastic podcasts and I feel like I'm just starting to scratch the surface, and almost every day I see new ones, whether that's recommended by YouTube or recommended within the ones that I watch, and it's just really nice to know there's so many people out there doing the same thing, having the same kind of chats and just sharing the passion that we all enjoy. There's so many, but I think I'll just stick with 2 today, otherwise I'll get too overexcited and share them all and then I won't have any to talk about next time. So I've got to rein it in. The first one that I'm going to shout out is a podcast by Lucy at This Nanny Knits. She very kindly shouted out my podcast in her most recent episode, which was really, really sweet of her. And her podcasts are such a joy to watch. She's comes across as just so lovely. She's a professional nanny, and when she's not nannying, she's knitting. Things I love about her podcast are the colours that she uses in her knits. She's really inspired me to try some hand-dyed yarns when I finished with my massive list of whips, but that's another story. She just uses some beautiful yarns to make some really lovely garments, and she just comes across as such a bright and cheery person who loves her hobby of knitting. So I definitely recommend her podcast. I think she's got 3 episodes out at the time of recording. So that's Lucy at This Nanny Knits, and I will link her YouTube channel in the description below, and also her Instagram profile. And the second one is a podcast by a knitter and designer called Lily Kate Makes. I've discovered Lily Kate's YouTube and Instagram profile just in the last couple of weeks, and I'm just blown away. She's, I think, 23, but has been designing knitwear since she was something ridiculous like 13, I think she said. Definitely fangirling over here. She's got, I think, 8 or 9 podcast episodes out, but she also has a lot of YouTube tutorials on really useful things like short rows, German short rows, how to crochet edging on things, just really useful tips that she uses in her patterns, but then her videos are also available on YouTube, even if you haven't bought the pattern, if that makes sense. So love her podcasts, and then through her podcast I've discovered some of her knitwear designs, which are stunning. Definitely a few of them going on my to knit list, which is ever expanding. For example, the Poison Apple Top just looks amazing. It's sort of a cap sleeve sort of t-shirt design, but with a sheer panel of mohair sort of across the upper chest. That's just really pretty. And I love her Greystone cardigan as well. List could go on. I told you I was fangirling. So definitely recommend checking out both of those 2 podcasts. The third one I'd like to just mention really quickly is Knit Slips. My friend Tom, who is the creator of Knit Slips. I know I mentioned him last week, but he is doing a mini series on crafting and mental health and the benefits thereof, which I think is fantastic. I'm taking part. I need to record my video, but there's been 2 already released. Tom's own story and Fabiola from Fabi Knits, and she's recorded a story as well, and he's released those 2 so far. I believe he's going to ask various different crafters and creators to tell their story, and then he will release them as part of his mini series. So I would definitely recommend having a look at that. You can find it from his, well, they're all on his YouTube channel, which I will link in the description, but you can see them on his Instagram TV as well through his Instagram profile. What a worthwhile mini series to make. Just outstanding work. Definitely go and watch. So I did my last podcast about 3 weeks ago now, and as you will remember, I have so many whips on the go, 8. I haven't actually I haven't finished any of them. There, said it. Confession. Haven't finished any of them so far. However, it's been quite a busy few weeks since I made that podcast. I've had a whole week of on calls and also preparing for our it's called ARCP. So as doctors, every year we basically have to submit a portfolio of evidence about achieving our competencies, and then a panel reviews it, and then if we've done what we should have done, we are allowed to progress and carry on being doctors. So it's all part of the revalidation process. Obviously really important, but it's quite a lot of work to prepare for when it comes around every year, and it's always this time of year, so that's been going on in the background as well, preparing for that. So I actually haven't had that much knitting time, and because I haven't really finished anything to show any finished objects, that would have made for a pretty boring episode. So I thought, why don't I kind of go back from the point at which we chatted last time and kind of have a look back at the knitting I did before that, because I started knitting 2 and a bit years ago now, so there's a lot of projects that didn't get talked about last episode. Call it knitting throwbacks, if you will. Laura from Penrose Knits, she did a similar thing where she kind of looked back at the items she'd made for her children, and it was really fun to kind of go back with her, or forwards, through her knitting journey, and kind of she like looked at some of the really early things she'd made and had a bit of a giggle at them, but also like looked at them and thought, wow, I've learned so much in the few years that I've been sort of doing this hobby. And I really liked that, and I don't have any children, so I haven't made anything for them, but I thought I could look back through the things that I have made for me and for other people. I think it's so easy, and kind of obviously social media has pros and cons, massive benefits in the knitting and fibre art world, but I think it does perpetuate the need to like always be looking at and doing like the next thing, and what am I going to do next, and creating content, and that side of it kind of just makes me a bit, I just think you have to be wary of it. So I thought that's another reason why it'd just be really nice to look back and see A, what I've made, B, the progress I've made, and C, just like kind of take a moment to just be proud of this hobby and what I've achieved. So I thought this would be a bit of fun to look back at things I've previously made and just briefly talk about them, and then for myself as well, kind of a reminder and to show how far I've developed my skills and confidence and techniques and all things like that. So I hope that's okay, and I hope you enjoy it, and maybe it will prompt you to have a look back through your previous makes as well. Some of the things I've made I don't have because either I've gifted them away, or some of the really early things I just don't have because they just weren't that great, and I've either used the yarn for other things, or I have thrown them out. That's probably not the best thing to have done, but we've moved house several times since the very first things I've made were finished, and you know, they were part of the journey of like development of skill and learning, but I probably wasn't going to wear them. So if I've got them here, they're in front of me and I'll show you, and if they're garments, I'll try and do some cutaways, and if I haven't got them, then I've got quite a few pictures and things which you might recognise from my Instagram, but also just some random pictures I had saved on my camera roll that I never uploaded. Tea. Say that's lukewarm at best, but actually I'm a bit warm, so that's okay. Button. They're a bit soft. Oh well. So, the first thing that I ever made was, and I don't have that here, it was a teeny tiny newborn baby hat on teeny tiny needles with teeny tiny yarn. And Cynthia, if you're watching, Cynthia is the receptionist at the GP practice who taught me to knit 2 and a bit years ago now on our lunch breaks. Why did you give me such tiny needles and tiny yarn and a tiny project? I'm kidding, like I will be forever grateful to you for introducing me to this hobby. But looking back now and seeing like how beginners normally start, I think, wow, that was really a baptism of fire. So Cynthia, one of the receptionists, one day had a teeny tiny baby hat on her desk. And I remember walking in to the office where the receptionist still sat and where we used to have coffee and lunch and chat, and saying to her, "Oh wow, what's that? That's really pretty. Did you make that?" And she said yes. And that was it, that was the beginning. I couldn't believe that she'd made it. I thought it was amazing. And I was like, oh, could you teach me? And bless her, the next day she came in with needles, yarn and a pattern and sat me down and I don't know how she managed to teach me so quickly, but she did anyway. But I looked back at the picture of the baby hat, which I will put up on the screen, and from the pattern I could see that it was a 4-ply yarn, size 12 UK needles, which equates to 2.75mm needles, which is like we're talking sock weight needles. Yeah, and the newborn pattern, so really small. And that was in October 2018. I can see the timestamp from that picture. So that is literally the first time I'd picked up knitting needles ever. I think my mum tried to teach me when I was really young, but it just didn't stick. Sorry, Mum. So yeah, that's the very first thing I made. From the picture you can see it's full of holes, full of mistakes. I didn't know how to sew it up, so it got whisked away and someone else did that. But you know, it had decreases at the top. Yeah, that was the first thing I ever made, and I remember being so proud of it. And now when I look back, I think, gosh, that is full of mistakes. Why was it so small? But still, you know, I don't think you can ever, probably everyone's got the same first object they made, haven't they? I'd be really interested to know, maybe write in the comments what your first ever thing you made was. And was it something so tiny? Was it something super chunky? Do you still have it? Yeah, I don't know what would have happened to that baby hat. Cynthia said she was going to give it to the lady who was collecting them all, who would sew it up for me, and then it would go to a baby. But it had so many holes, I reckon the baby would have had a pretty cold head. So sorry to whoever's baby that hat got given to. You got a poor draw on that one. So, from the tiniest hat ever, the second, well, couple of things I ever made, from the tiniest hat ever to the biggest hat in the world, it was just ridiculous. I'll put a picture of it on the screen. So, spurred on by the teeny tiny baby hat, I rushed out to Hobbycraft, picked up some needles and some yarn, which is so funny to think back now, because like now I know so much about needles and yarn, but back then it was literally like, I need some needles, that'll do. I need some yarn, that'll do. That's not very expensive, that'll do. And I think I got some pony 10mm needles, the plastic ones, straight ones, and some, I've written it down here. Oh yeah, it was just some acrylic yarn from Hobbycraft, Sirdar Hayfield Super Chunky. And I found a pattern for a hat and a pattern for a scarf. It was quite ambitious to start with a hat, I suppose, because hats have got quite a lot. They've got like ribbing and then they've got shaping, haven't they? But there you go. I think I probably made the scarf first, actually. Yeah, I think I did. Sideline scarf by 5410 Studio, and it's a really nice pattern. Kind of looks like garter stitch, but then it's got like these subtle lines down it, which just makes it a little bit different. I remember, I think you had to alternate your stitch pattern, and basically I got just really confused with it, and I'll put the picture up because it was meant to be making like a kind of garter stitch-esque pattern, and I ended up with 3x3 rib, and I was so confused as to why. And now I realise it's because I didn't stack my knits and pearls properly, alternating. I must have stacked them on top of each other to make the rib. But I just remember being so confused as to why my piece of knitting looked so different to the picture, which is just funny, isn't it, when you think back? But until you, like, that's how you learn, I suppose. So yeah, I eventually made the scarf, and then in the same yarn I made, from Mad Monkey Knits, I found a hat pattern on Etsy. It was called the Extra Roomy Super Chunky Moss Stitch Bobble Beanie Hat, which is a mouthful. And oh my word, it was extra roomy. I think a combination of not doing a gauge swatch, because I didn't even know what those were back then, and probably overestimating my head size. My head is huge, but I'm not really conscious of it, so I always overestimate it. But yeah, it was essentially a moss stitch hat with a bobble on top, but it just came out huge. And I remember that picture where I'm wearing the hat and the scarf. I'm literally so proud. I wore the scarf everywhere, wore the hat everywhere for a while, and I was just so proud of it. But now I look back at it and it's like, it was just so big. Why did no one tell me? Why didn't I realise that hats aren't meant to be that big? But, you know. Then I discovered Wool and the Gang, and my life changed. Well, that's a bit dramatic, but you know what I mean. I think once I'd discovered that super chunky knitting was the way to go, I then was like, right, looking for super chunky knit patterns and beginner friendly stuff. I remember stumbling across Wool and the Gang and seeing all their kits. Whoever is in charge of their marketing and like social media and digital stuff, well, give that guy or gal a medal. You reeled me in, and I'm still in, to be fair. So I think once the knitting obsession started, I remember seeing Wool and the Gang being like, oh wow, I'd really like to make something of theirs. But it's quite expensive, and compared to, you know, like hobbycraft acrylic yarn, it's like really expensive. I remember being like, oh, I don't know if I should spend so much money on this, like I'm not very good, you know, all the thoughts that we all probably have. So Christmas 2018, I asked for a Wool and the Gang voucher. I thought, right, if I can like use a voucher, then that's not me spending so much money. So I deliberated over and over again about what to spend this voucher on, like all the things to make. I settled on the Hero Cardigan by Wool and the Gang, which is a super chunky cardigan, stockinette, knitting panels in their Crazy Sexy Wool, which is like the really chunky wool equivalent to the wool by We Are Knitters, and you know, those really super chunky roving non-ply beautiful yarns. And I settled on Eagle Grey as the colour, and I remember just thinking, wow, that's so nice. That was like the first project that I was just so excited to make. It was on 15mm needles, like I said, knit flat, on super chunky yarn. And yeah, I still wear it to this day actually. I've got it here. Ta-da! Oops. It's very big, very heavy, very chunky. Needs a good comb over actually, with a wool comb. You can see ribbing at the bottom, ribbing on the neckband, otherwise stockinette. Yeah, such a nice colour. The only thing with this is that I did it all and was really proud of how I'd managed to, you know, pick up stitches for the sleeve and, you know, done it all properly. And then I'm still annoyed about this looking at it now, but you learn. I rushed the end of the neckband because I just wanted it to be finished, and I don't think I quite lined up, you know, where the neckband comes down to meet the bottom ribbing. I don't think I quite picked up the stitches in the right place, and you can see there it's just a bit wonky. That is the bottom, like if that, oh god, if that's the sleeve and that's the bottom ribbing there, yeah, it's just it's just wonky. And I remember being really confused as to why it was wonky and not realising that I hadn't probably picked up a stitch almost right down to the cast on or off edge at the bottom, and then just trying a few things to bodge it and just making it worse. I think we've all been there, haven't we? And to be fair, I've never blocked this, so blocking maybe would stretch it out a little bit. But it's just one of those quirks of something that you've made yourself. And, you know, considering it was the first proper garment I ever made, I think it's all right. It's just a great cardigan for, you know, those just really cold winter days where you just can't get warm and you just want to like wear a blanket basically. So that's that. Yeah, still wear it to this day and keeps me very warm. So if that was like the first knitting love of my life, enter the second knitting love of my life, Lauren Aston Designs. I absolutely love Lauren and her whole brand and her ethos. It's just fantastic. I went through a phase of having bought a lot of yarn and patterns from her, as you'll see as we go through. I ended up for a period as well subscribing to her monthly yarn subscription, which was great. You got like yarn in the post, which is just an absolute dream. I don't do it anymore because I've kind of not such a super chunky knitter anymore. I feel like, does everyone go through that, not a phase because that makes it sound silly, but I feel like when beginners start, it's so much easier, isn't it, to start with super chunky needles and yarn because you can see what you're doing better, and then it grows, what you're making grows, and you can see your progress, and it's just very fulfilling. But I feel like I got to a certain stage and then I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to make super chunky stuff anymore. And then now I'm kind of in the like kind of, I feel like as I've got more experienced, the yarn and needle size is just going down and down and down and down. And yeah, knitting takes a lot longer these days to make a finished project. Is that the same for everyone? Is that just me? Is that a natural progression? Do some people stay with super chunky forever? I don't know. So the first Lauren Aston Designs kit I bought was the Colourpop Mittens. And kind of like with the Wool and the Gang thing, I remember like lusting after Lauren's designs for ages. I first saw her on Etsy, I think it was, years and years ago, when she was mainly doing like jumbo knitting. I think that's what made her like stand out to me from other things I'd seen. And I mean like the really big knitting, like with the huge needles that are like this big, and the arm knitting and the massive blankets and cushions and things. And I remember thinking that's really, really cool, but way out of my price range for, you know, the level that I was at. So I just remember like seeing her stuff on Instagram and her website and thinking, oh, I'd really like to make some of her stuff, but not sure I can afford it, da 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 da. And I specifically remember being sat in the theatre coffee room at work when I was on Obs and Gynae, bizarrely, and just deciding that now was the time to try her yarn and try a kit. So I ordered the Colourpop mitten kit in light grey and emerald for the colour pop like tip of the mitten, and was so excited when it arrived, like packaging, cardboard box wrapped with a yarn ribbon, like what's not to love. And yeah, they're here, mittens. They're a little bit creased. Here they are, 1 and 2. They're just such pretty colours. Again, need a good going over with the wool comb, because it's summer. I haven't obviously worn them in a while, so they're a bit misshapen, but they're just they're just really cute. And they were a nice quick make on 10mm needles. They're actually quite tricky, you know. This bit's 2x2 rib and then garter stitch with a bit of shaping and then sewn up, so that was okay. But then thumb. I've never made mittens since, but I remember like this bit was really tricky, and you had to put stitches on a stitch holder and then, you know, pick them up. And at the time I didn't realise, but since looking at these now, I actually think I've made 2 left mittens, and I don't quite know how I've managed to do that. I must have read the instructions wrong, but can you see what I mean? Like, they both, from where the seam is on both, that thumb is definitely, it should be on the other side for the other mitten. And if I turn it round, say turn this one around, the thumb is just like at the back. That's definitely not right. Another hilarious thing that you do when you're a novice knitter. But do you know what? I love that. That's just great. 2 left mittens. Maybe I'll make one day, right? Maybe from scraps actually. I could make 2 right mittens, and then I could have, you know, like one in one colourway, one in the other. And then I could gift the other pair to somebody. Maybe my mum. Some people will know what these are before I even say. And I feel like this is when I was still in my wool in the gang like phase, time of life. These are the Kind of Magic socks, and they are so cool. And actually I've never made socks since, so I'm pretty impressed I managed to do these so early on in my like knitting career. Is that how we would describe? Oops. We'll go with career. So from the timestamp of the picture I have of these, this is June 2019. So only like 6 to 9 months after I actually started knitting, which is pretty fun. So I think so many people that I follow on Instagram have made these. I feel like it's kind of like a rite of passage to make some Kind of Magic socks. These were, I'm not gonna lie, a struggle and turned into a labour of love, and we nearly fell out many times, and I'm amazed I've actually even got 2 socks that go together, because at one point I would never even have got 1 sock, never mind 2. I actually bought these in the Wool in the Gang sale as a set of 3 different colourways. These are Feline Good Green, they're called, but I also got, I think, a pale blue and the Cool Cat Copper, I think, can't remember exactly, but maybe it says a bit about how difficult I found these that only 1 pair have been made. The other 2 pairs remain in their ball in my stash somewhere to be knitted someday. So yeah, these are Kind of Magic socks by Wool in the Gang, using, I don't know how you say it, Regia yarn. It's a self-patterning yarn, which is really clever, but in order to get the leopard spot pattern, which I have managed to get here, I think you have to have your gauge and tension like bang on. Even if it's a little bit out, everything will start sloping and slanting, like you can kind of see at the top there and there, and you don't really get like the leopard pattern. you know, which is fine if you're not that bothered. I've seen some people who just, like me, couldn't get a gauge, found it really frustrating, thought, do you know what, I've got some decent yarn, I'm just gonna see what happens and make a pair of colourful socks, which is absolutely fine. But I am a bit of a perfectionist, a big bit of a perfectionist. I think that's like a common trait in knitters, isn't it? Unfortunately. Well, fortunately for our craft, but maybe unfortunately for our sanity and time. I wanted to get it right, basically. So it took many goes. The kit of the sock comes with obviously the ball of self-patterning yarn, and then 3 sizes of double pointed needles, 2.25, 2.5 and 2.75 millimeter needles. And that's great because obviously Wool and the gang appreciate that not everyone will be able to get a gauge with the same needle size. So I thought, great, using some of these needles I will manage to get the gauge. But I swear I tried it on every single one, which was a lot of time and effort, and it still wasn't working on any of the 3 sizes. I even ordered some 3mm ones because at that stage, as I think with a lot of new knitters, my tension was really tight. So I thought, oh, is it that? So I ordered some 3mm ones, and even that wasn't working. I tried casting on more stitches, less stitches, decreasing halfway through or after the cuff. I can't even remember everything I tried, but yeah, I even tried sort of intentionally loosening my gauge, which is really difficult to do, and I wouldn't recommend it because it's not really sustainable. Like, I feel like your gauge is your gauge. You can't actively try and knit any looser or tighter. It just doesn't really work for a sustained project. But I did try that, still didn't work. And I remember being like, honestly, just about to just bin them off, put them in the pile of shame and not retrieve them. And then one day, literally, you'll not believe me when I say this, but one day, just out of the blue, I just tried again on, I think, the 2.75s. So one of the biggest needle size that came with the kit, but not the biggest ones I'd bought to try and get the gauge right. Just worked. No apparent reason. Just worked. So yeah, and then I managed to somehow do the same for the second sock. I cast it on straight after because I was like, I've managed to do it somehow. So yeah, that is the story of the Kind of Magic socks. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of them, to be honest. I've worn them a few times. I think because obviously the gauge just was a bit of a nightmare and I wasn't very experienced when I made these. They are a bit big for my foot. I think they're both a bit long and a bit wide, which is fine. They're kind of more like in the house cold feet socks rather than undershoes outside socks. But yeah, that's them. Kind of fun inside as well. I've had to retreat my buttons to the shade. Let's now talk about the biggest thing I've ever made, maybe will ever make. That's quite a claim. Yeah, I'm not sure I'll make anything bigger than this. I'm talking about the knitted beanbag that I made for Pete for his birthday 2 years ago. Yeah, June 2019. I'm talking about my Shavasana beanbag, which the pattern for which is by NoandEl. She's a designer on Etsy and Instagram, and she seems to make a lot of super chunky designs. I was thinking about what to get him / make him for his birthday, and I wanted it to be something special, and I just had this idea of making a knitted beanbag for him / for us in our apartment that we had together. And I remember looking around for a pattern and finding the one from NoandEl and thinking that is absolutely perfect. It makes a really big beanbag. I would highly recommend, if you're looking for something to make for someone that's not a garment or an accessory, you know, like a hat or a scarf or something. It's fun, it's easy, give it a go. So I made this beanbag in paint box yarn, super chunky wool mix in the colour slate grey. On review, with hindsight, I wouldn't have chosen the wool mix blend of acrylic and wool. I think for an accessory that you're going to sit on, there's absolutely no need to have the wool factor in there, and because of the quantities of yarn involved in knitting a large item like a beanbag on 25mm needles, really big, double-stranded, it needed a lot of yarn. I can't remember how much I ordered a lot and then needed more. So I think, you know, in retrospect, if I hadn't have used the wool mix, it probably would have been a bit cheaper. And I don't know why I thought you needed wool mix like to sit on. It's not really necessary, but you know, only the best for Pete, and it is very comfy. But I think probably wool mix would be more necessary for like a garment, not really a beanbag. So yeah, that's the yarn. When I knitted it up, the two sides, the two rectangles, I actually preferred the reverse stockinette side, like the bumpy fabric that created, than the V's of the stockinette. So I just decided to sew it up inside out. The one you'll see if you look at NoandEl's pattern on Etsy is stockinette facing outwards, but mine is reverse stockinette facing outwards. I think both are nice, but I just really liked the reverse stockinette look. So the fun and games with the beanbag was, you only have these ideas and you get carried away and you're like, right, yes, this is what I'm doing, it's gonna be great. And then you think about the practicalities. So knitting something so big when you live with the person that you're trying to gift it to was not easy. Luckily, in the knitting stages, like, it could obviously be folded up and hidden away in like my wardrobe or drawer or something, which he wouldn't delve into. But once I'd knitted it and needed to store it constructed, that was a nightmare. Couldn't keep it in the house, had to store it off-site somewhere. And also I just, again, speaking of being carried away, a bit like how if you make a cushion cover, you obviously need a cushion inside. I just didn't think about how the actual beanbag inside would be a thing. I'd only made myself a beanbag cover, which by the nature of knitted fabric is like expandable and holey and not something that will contain teeny tiny polystyrene beans that fill a beanbag. In the pattern by NoandEl, I think she lives in the US or Canada. She had basically made the pattern to the dimensions of either a beanbag liner, which she'd got from one of their shops over there, or she'd already got the beanbag. And yeah, I just didn't think that through. So to the rescue was one of my knitting heroes, Laura Edwards. If you're watching, thank you so much for saving my bacon on this one. So one of my previous supervisors on one of my placements when I was in foundation years as a newly qualified doctor, I was on a palliative care job, and the consultant, Laura, was also a knitting enthusiast, and I told her about the beanbag and she saved my life essentially. She's like nifty with a sewing machine, whereas I have no idea what I'm doing, don't own one, don't know anyone else who owns one. Essentially she took me to a fabric shop, helped me pick out some fabric which matched the colour of the yarn, and sewed me a beanbag inner complete with Velcro fastening so I could easily put the beans in. And then it's just incredible. In future she was thinking about me needing to add more beans. Amazing. So yeah, I'll always be entirely grateful to Laura for that. And she also let me store the massive beanbag in her office, so I used to go there after work to fill the beanbag with beans, which honestly sounds like, oh, I'll just fill it with beans, but it took forever because the beans were so tiny, and I won't bore you with the details, but I essentially needed like a funnel and didn't have one, so ended up just using like jugs to like pour these ridiculous beans which float and fly everywhere into the small opening in the beanbag. All after hours. I always thought the cleaner was going to come and like be like, who is this person, what are you doing in this office? So funny. A few evenings were spent like that, but it was worth it for the surprise. The beanbag is amazing. We use it all the time. I'm looking at it now, sat in the corner of the room, that's why I'm looking over there. It's super comfy, and it hasn't actually peeled that much considering, you know, it's like quite high use. It's peeled a little bit at the front, like where your legs would kind of rub against it, but I haven't ever tried my wool shaver or wool comb, so I might try that. But really, considering the usage, it's not that bad. So yeah, that is the story of the biggest make of my knitting career. So I think I've been filming for about an hour, and as I said at the beginning, I really don't want these episodes to be too long. I'm maybe wrongly, but I'm worried that will put people off watching them. I can't believe I've managed to speak for so long again, and I've only got about halfway through what I was going to talk about, so I'm going to break here and like use the rest of the content that I've got prepared for episode 3 or 2, part 2, whatever I'll end up calling it. So I really hope you've enjoyed watching so far. I really hope you've enjoyed like having a look back with me through what I've made throughout my knitting journey, like right from the beginning. It's been really fun. I've really enjoyed it. I think, yeah, like I said at the beginning, some of the things I've talked about I'd forgotten about. Some of the things have really made me realise like how much progress I've made. In the next episode, I'm looking at what I've still got to talk about, and it's like much more like garment and sweater orientated. Quite a few test knits, and I think I can really see how much I've progressed, having just talked about all the things we've covered in this episode and looking at what's in front of me. I think the standard gets a bit better. Really hope you've enjoyed watching. Please leave me a comment with any feedback or any thoughts. I'd love to hear, like I said earlier, like what the first things you've made, what projects you look back on and think, wow, I've really improved, or what you look back on fondly, or any funny novice knitting errors like I made with the beanbag and with the 2 left thumbs on the mitten. One of the things I loved about the last episode was just people leaving comments from all over the world, and I felt like I was just chatting away to people that I've never met, and just having, you know, things in common, and people leaving me little stories about things they've made or opinions on the things I've made. I just really enjoyed it. So please leave me a comment. I've tried my best to reply to each one. I'm really sorry if I've accidentally missed you. If you enjoy the videos that I've made and am making, please subscribe, that would be fantastic. And just if you wouldn't mind sharing as well, either on social media or through word of mouth, either is absolutely great. So I will see you next time, and we will pick up where we left off after the big beanbag with my first sweater, I think, looking at what's on the floor in front of me. Have a lovely day. Bye.